The dust-choked air of Redemption Springs carried whispers about the peculiar girl with mismatched eyes who arrived on the eastbound stagecoach in the summer of 1875. Olivia Zimmerman stepped down onto the sun-baked dirt of Main Street, her threadbare carpetbag clutched tightly against her chest like a shield. The townsfolk stared openly, not bothering to hide their judgment or suspicion as she made her way toward the only boarding house in town. "Look at her," one woman whispered to another, not caring if Olivia overheard. "Doesn't look like she belongs anywhere, that one." Olivia kept her head down, pretending not to hear. She'd heard worse before. Ever since she was a child, people had told her she didn't belong. Born with one eye blue as a summer sky and the other green as spring grass, Olivia had always been an oddity. Her mismatched eyes were just the beginning of her troubles. Orphaned at 12, she'd been shuffled from one reluctant relative to another, never staying long enough to call any place home. Now, at 22, she had come to Redemption Springs as a last resort, answering an advertisement for a schoolteacher position. The town was desperate enough to hire her sight unseen, something that never happened in more established Eastern communities where her peculiarities made her unsuitable for teaching impressionable children. The boarding house matron, Mrs. Holloway, gave Olivia a once-over with pinched lips. "I run a respectable establishment," she said, accepting Olivia's advance payment with obvious reluctance. "No gentlemen callers, no noise after 8, and church on Sundays is mandatory." "Yes, madam," Olivia replied, her voice barely audible. Mrs. Holloway sniffed. "Room at the top of the stairs, last door on the left. Smallest room, but it'll do for someone like you." "Someone like you." The words followed Olivia up the narrow staircase, familiar companions that had trailed her from Boston to Philadelphia to Chicago, and now to this dusty frontier town. The room was indeed small, with a narrow bed, a washstand with a cracked basin, and a small window that overlooked the livery stable across the street. Olivia set down her bag and sank onto the bed, allowing herself a moment of doubt. Had coming west been a mistake? She took a deep breath and straightened her shoulders. No, she had made the right decision. Redemption Springs would be different. It had to be. The following morning, Olivia made her way to the schoolhouse at the edge of town. The building was in disrepair, with broken windows patched with oilcloth and a sagging roof. Inside wasn't much better: mismatched desks, a scarred teacher's desk, and a small blackboard with barely enough chalk to write a full lesson. Mayor Thompson, a portly man with a florid face, met her there with obvious impatience. "School term starts Monday. You'll have about 20 pupils, ages 5 to 16. Some will only come when their families don't need them for planting or harvest." The last teacher left in the middle of the night, couldn't handle frontier life. He looked her up and down skeptically. "Can't imagine you'll last long either." Olivia swallowed her retort. "I'll do my best, Mayor Thompson." "We'll see," he replied, handing her a ring of keys. "Town meeting tonight. You should come. Let the parents get a look at you before they send their children." The town meeting was held in the church, the only building large enough to accommodate most of Redemption Springs residents. Olivia sat in the back, trying to be inconspicuous, but her presence drew curious glances and not so subtle whispers. When Mayor Thompson introduced her as the new schoolteacher, the reaction was immediate and unsettling. "Those eyes, is she a witch?" someone called out. "My Johnny ain't being taught by no peculiar woman," declared another. "She don't look right," an elderly woman announced. "Folks that don't look right don't belong here." Olivia stood, her knees trembling beneath her skirts. "I assure you I am fully qualified. I graduated from the Boston Teachers College with honors, and fancy Eastern education don't mean nothing out here." interrupted a woman with 3 young children clustered around her skirts. "We need someone who understands our ways." "I'm willing to learn," Olivia replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "Learning takes time," Mayor Thompson said with a dismissive wave. "And time is something we don't have. But seeing as you're all we've got until someone better comes along, you'll have to do. Someone better." The words echoed in Olivia's mind as she walked back to the boarding house in the gathering dusk. Always someone better, someone normal, someone who belonged. The first day of school arrived, and Olivia faced a room of suspicious children and even more suspicious parents who lingered at the doorway, watching her every move. She began with introductions, trying to memorize each child's name, but their wary expressions made it difficult to connect. "Miss Zimmerman," said one boy about 14, raising his hand with obvious mockery, "my pa wants to know if your funny eyes mean you see things different than normal folks." The children giggled, and Olivia felt her cheeks warm. "I see things just fine, thank you." "Now, let's begin with our reading lesson." The days that followed were challenging. Some parents withdrew their children outright, unwilling to let them be taught by that strange woman. Others sent their children with instructions to report back on every unusual thing the teacher did or said. One afternoon, Olivia was writing arithmetic problems on the blackboard when a rock shattered the newly repaired window, sending glass fragments across the schoolroom floor. She quickly moved the children away from the danger, then looked outside to see 3 teenage boys running away, laughing. "Which go home," one of them shouted over his shoulder. That evening, as she swept up the broken glass, Olivia heard the sound of a horse approaching. She looked up to see a tall man dismounting from a chestnut gelding. He removed his hat, revealing sun-streaked brown hair and a weathered face that spoke of years under the open sky. "Heard there was some trouble at the schoolhouse," he said, his voice deep and accented with the rhythms of the frontier. "Thought I might lend a hand." "I appreciate the offer, Mr. Flynn Xavier. I run the Xavier Ranch about 5 miles east of town." He gestured toward the broken window. "Mind if I take a look?" Olivia stepped aside, watching as he examined the damage with practiced eyes. "I can fix this for you. Got some glass at the ranch that'll fit just right." "Why would you help me?" Olivia asked, unable to keep the suspicion from her voice. No one in Redemption Springs had offered help before. Flynn's eyes, a warm hazel that reminded her of autumn leaves, met hers directly without flinching at her mismatched gaze. "Because it's the right thing to do, and because I don't hold with running people off just because they're different. The people here seem to have made up their minds about me already." Flynn smiled slightly. "Folks around here are suspicious of anything new. Give them time." "Time," Olivia repeated, remembering Mayor Thompson's words. "That seems to be the one thing I don't have much of in this town." "Then we'd best make good use of what you do have," Flynn replied, putting his hat back on. "I'll be back tomorrow with that glass and some proper tools." True to his word, Flynn returned the next day, arriving just as school let out. He brought not only glass for the window, but also wood to repair the sagging front steps and a tin of paint for the weathered door. As he worked, Olivia found herself watching him. There was something comforting about his quiet competence, the way he moved with purpose and precision. "You're staring, Miss Zimmerman," he said without looking up from his work. Olivia blushed. "I apologize. I was just wondering why you're being so kind when everyone else in town seems determined to drive me away." Flynn paused, resting his hands on his knees as he considered her question. "My mother wasn't from these parts. She was Shoshone. Folks didn't think she belonged with my pa, a white rancher. She used to say that belonging isn't about where you're from or what you look like, it's about finding the place where your heart can rest easy." "And did she?" Find that place. With my pa, yes. With the town, not entirely, but she was stronger than their judgment. Flynn stood, dusting off his hands. You remind me of her a bit. Got that same look in your eyes like you're ready to stand your ground even when the wind's blowing against you. Before Olivia could respond, the door to the schoolhouse opened and Mayor Thompson entered, his expression souring when he saw Flynn. Xavier, he acknowledged curtly. What brings you to town? Just helping Miss Zimmerman with some repairs, Flynn replied, his tone equally cool. Mayor Thompson's gaze shifted between them. Miss Zimmerman, a word. He didn't wait for her response before stepping outside, clearly expecting her to follow. Outside, the mayor didn't bother to lower his voice. You do well to keep your distance from Xavier. His mother being what she was has always made his loyalties questionable. His mother being Shoshone doesn't make him any less trustworthy, Olivia replied, her voice firm despite her racing heart. This isn't Boston, Miss Zimmerman. Out here, who a person's people are matters. The mayor's expression hardened. Just like your peculiarities matter, the school board is reconsidering your position. There's talk of writing to Sacramento for a more suitable teacher. I have a contract, Olivia protested. Contracts can be broken. With that, Mayor Thompson turned and walked away, leaving Olivia standing in the dusty schoolyard, her dreams of belonging once again slipping through her fingers. When she returned inside, Flynn was packing up his tools. I gather from your expression that wasn't a pleasant conversation. They're trying to replace me, Olivia said, her voice hollow. Just like everywhere else I'm not suitable. Flynn's expression darkened. Because of your eyes, that's foolishness. It's never just my eyes, Olivia admitted. It's everything about me. I don't fit anywhere. That's not true, Flynn said, stepping closer. You fit right here, teaching these children who need someone to believe in them. He hesitated, then added more softly, and if they can't see that, then maybe Redemption Springs doesn't deserve you. His words, spoken with such conviction, caught Olivia by surprise. For a moment, she allowed herself to believe him, to imagine that perhaps this time might be different. Thank you for fixing the window, she said finally, unable to address the more personal aspects of their conversation. Flynn nodded, understanding her retreat. If you need anything else, my ranch isn't far. Just follow the east road until you see the split rail fence with the carved X. After he left, Olivia stood in the quiet schoolroom, feeling something she hadn't felt in a very long time, a flicker of hope. The next few weeks brought both challenges and small victories. Some of Olivia's students began to warm to her, especially after she introduced them to poetry and stories that transported them beyond their frontier existence. She stayed late each day, preparing lessons and cleaning the schoolhouse, determined to prove her worth through sheer diligence. One evening, as dusk painted the sky in shades of lavender and gold, Olivia was startled by a knock at the schoolhouse door. She opened it to find Flynn standing there, hat in hand. Miss Zimmerman, he greeted her. I was passing through and thought you might appreciate a ride back to town. It's getting dark. Olivia hesitated, aware of how such an offer might be perceived. That's very kind, but I wouldn't want to cause gossip. Gossip finds its way regardless, Flynn replied with a slight smile. At least this way you won't have to walk in the dark. Against her better judgment, Olivia accepted. The ride into town was short but pleasant, with Flynn pointing out constellations just beginning to emerge in the darkening sky. He helped her down from his horse in front of the boarding house, his hands strong and steady at her waist. Thank you for the ride, Mr. Xavier, Olivia said, conscious of Mrs. Holloway watching from the window. Flynn, he corrected. Mr. Xavier was my father. Then thank you, Flynn, he nodded, a smile warming his eyes. Good night, Miss Zimmerman. Olivia, she offered in return. If we're to use first names. Olivia, he repeated, the name sounding different in his voice, like something precious. Good night. As she watched him ride away, Olivia felt a strange tightness in her chest, a sensation she couldn't quite name, but that left her feeling both unsettled and oddly content. The next morning, Mrs. Holloway cornered her at breakfast. "I saw you with the Xavier man last night," she said, her tone accusatory. "I told you when you arrived no gentleman callers. He merely offered me a ride from the schoolhouse," Olivia explained. "It was getting dark." Mrs. Holloway's expression remained skeptical. "His kind don't mix with respectable women. His mother was a savage, and the apple doesn't fall far from the tree." Olivia felt a surge of anger. His mother was Shoshone, not a savage, and Flynn Xavier has shown me nothing but kindness when few others in this town have bothered. "Kindness with expectations," Mrs. Holloway retorted. "Mark my words, girl, he's after something, and a woman alone needs to guard her reputation carefully." The warning followed Olivia throughout the day, mingling with her own doubts. Was Flynn simply being kind, or was there something more? And why did the possibility of something more both frighten and exhilarate her? These questions were still circling in her mind when she arrived at the schoolhouse to find several parents waiting for her, their expressions grim. "Miss Zimmerman," said Mrs. Peterson, whose two sons were among Olivia's most reluctant students, "we've come to talk about your teaching methods." "And your personal conduct," added Mr. Jenkins, the blacksmith whose daughter had only recently begun to participate in class. Olivia steeled herself. "What concerns do you have? You're filling the children's heads with nonsense," Mrs. Peterson declared. "Poetry and stories about far-off places they'll never see, teaching them that they could be more than what they are. And worse," Mr. Jenkins continued, "you're carrying on with that half-breed Xavier right in front of the town. What kind of example is that for our daughters?" "I am not carrying on with anyone," Olivia replied, her voice shaking with suppressed anger. "Mr. Xavier has kindly helped with repairs to the schoolhouse and once offered me a ride into town when it was getting dark. That is the extent of our association." "It doesn't matter," Mrs. Peterson said. "People are talking. Between your strange eyes and your Eastern ways, you've been trouble from the start. Now this business with Xavier confirms it. You don't belong here, Miss Zimmerman." The words struck Olivia like physical blows, each one finding the tender places in her heart where hope had begun to take root. She looked at their closed faces, their minds already made up, and felt the familiar weight of rejection settling over her. "I see," she said quietly. "Is that the consensus among all the parents?" "The school board is meeting tonight," Mr. Jenkins replied. "I think it's clear which way they'll vote." After they left, Olivia sat at her desk, staring at the lesson plans she had so carefully prepared. Outside, she could hear the children gathering, their voices bright with the promise of a new day. She took a deep breath, wiped away the single tear that had escaped, and went to open the door. Whatever happened, she would finish this day with dignity. The school day passed in a blur of reading lessons and arithmetic. Olivia threw herself into teaching with renewed passion, as if by sheer force of will she could change the minds of the town. When the last child had gone home, she remained at her desk, unwilling to return to the boarding house where more disapproval surely waited. The sound of approaching hoofbeats drew her attention to the window. Flynn Xavier dismounted from his horse, his expression concerned as he entered the schoolhouse. "I heard about the parents' visit this morning," he said without preamble. "Word travels fast in small towns." "Yes, I'm learning that," Olivia replied, attempting a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "The school board meets tonight. It seems my time in Redemption Springs may be coming to an end." Flynn's jaw tightened. Because of me, not just you. My eyes, my teaching methods, my Eastern background, it seems everything about me is wrong for this town. Not everything, Flynn said softly, and not for everyone. Olivia looked up, startled by the intensity in his voice. What do you mean? He moved closer, his eyes never leaving hers. I mean that I see you, Olivia Zimmerman. I see your kindness with the children, your determination to make a place for yourself here despite everything. I see your courage. And your eyes, he paused, a smile tugging at his lips. Your beautiful, unique eyes that see the world differently than anyone else. Olivia's heart pounded in her chest. Flynn, let me finish, he said gently. The town meeting tonight, I'll be there, and I'll speak for you if you'll let me. Why would you do that? You'll only make yourself more of an outcast. Flynn laughed softly. I've been an outcast my whole life, Olivia. Being half Shoshone in a white man's world teaches you that belonging isn't about fitting in, it's about standing your ground and finding the people who see your worth. His words resonated with something deep inside her, a longing she had carried for as long as she could remember. And do you? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. See my worth. Flynn reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed a strand of hair from her face. From the moment I first saw you, standing in this schoolhouse with broken glass at your feet and fire in your eyes. The town meeting that evening was held in the church, just as before. This time, however, Olivia walked in with her head high, Flynn Xavier at her side. The whispers that followed them down the aisle were like a physical presence, pressing against them from all sides. Mayor Thompson gavelled the meeting to order, his gaze lingering disapprovingly on Flynn and Olivia sitting side by side in the front pew. We're here tonight to discuss the matter of our schoolteacher, he announced. There have been concerns raised about Miss Zimmerman's suitability for the position. One by one, parents stood to voice their objections. Her strange eyes made the children uncomfortable. Her lessons focused too much on the wider world and not enough on practical skills. Her association with Flynn Xavier raised questions about her moral character. When the last complaint had been heard, Mayor Thompson turned to Olivia. Miss Zimmerman, do you have anything to say in your defense? Olivia stood, her hands trembling slightly at her sides. I came to Redemption Springs because I believed I could make a difference here. I've tried to teach your children not just reading and arithmetic, but also how to think for themselves, how to imagine possibilities beyond what they can see. Yes, my eyes are different. Yes, I come from the East. But those things don't define who I am or what I can offer this community. She paused, looking around the room at the faces watching her, some hostile, some curious, a few even sympathetic. All my life people have told me I don't belong, and perhaps they're right. Perhaps I don't belong in Redemption Springs either. But I believe every child deserves a teacher who believes in their potential, and I had hoped to be that teacher here. As she sat down, Flynn squeezed her hand briefly before rising to his feet. I'd like to speak if I may. Mayor Thompson frowned. This matter doesn't concern you, Xavier. I disagree, Flynn replied calmly. When this town turns its back on someone because they're different, it concerns all of us who don't fit neatly into your idea of what's right and proper. A murmur ran through the crowd, but Flynn continued, his voice steady and clear. My father came west seeking gold but found something more valuable, freedom from the prejudices of the East. He fell in love with my mother, a Shoshone woman wiser and stronger than any person he'd ever known. They built something beautiful together, despite people like you telling them it wasn't possible, wasn't right. He turned to look directly at Olivia. Miss Zimmerman has brought something precious to our children, a window to worlds beyond these mountains, beyond this life. She's teaching them to dream bigger, to be more than what circumstances have handed them. And you want to drive her away because her eyes don't match, because she speaks to me in public. Flynn's gaze swept the room, challenging each person he looked at. If that's the kind of town Redemption Springs has become, then perhaps it's not worthy of its name. For a long moment, silence filled the church. Then, from the back pew, a small voice piped up. "I like Miss Zimmerman's eyes." It was Lucy Miller, a 7-year-old with a stutter who had blossomed under Olivia's patient guidance. She doesn't laugh when I can't say my words right, and she knows stories about places I never heard of. Lucy's mother put an arm around her daughter's shoulders, looking embarrassed but not silencing her. Another voice joined in Samuel Washington, whose mathematical abilities Olivia had nurtured despite his family's poverty. "Miss Zimmerman gave me extra lessons so I could keep up." No teacher ever did that before. One by one, children and then a few parents spoke up, sharing small kindnesses Olivia had shown, improvements they had noticed in their children's learning or confidence. Mayor Thompson banged his gavel repeatedly, trying to regain control of the meeting. "This is all very touching, but the school board has concerns about Miss Zimmerman's character, particularly in light of her association with Mr. Xavier." "Then let me clarify that association," Flynn said, his voice cutting through the noise. He turned to face Olivia directly, taking both her hands in his. "Olivia Zimmerman, from the moment I met you, I recognized something in you that called to me a spirit that refuses to be broken, a heart that sees beyond appearances to what truly matters. I don't care what anyone in this town thinks about your eyes or my heritage. I know who you are and I know where you belong." He paused, his gaze never leaving hers. "You belong right here beside me, if you'll have me." A collective gasp went through the church, followed by furious whispers. Olivia stood frozen, scarcely able to believe what she was hearing. "Flynn," she whispered, aware of every eye upon them but suddenly caring only about the man before her. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that I love you, Olivia. I'm saying that if this town won't accept you as you are, then we'll make our own place where both of us belong." He smiled, a rare full smile that transformed his weathered face. "My ranch isn't much compared to Eastern comforts, but it's a good place. It could be a home, our home." Mayor Thompson slammed his gavel down with enough force to crack the wooden surface. "This is outrageous. Mr. Xavier, you are out of order. Miss Zimmerman, your contract is hereby terminated effective immediately. I want you both out of this church and out of this town by morning." "Now wait just a minute," came a new voice. Harold Jenkins, the blacksmith who had been among Olivia's critics that very morning, stood up. "I didn't agree to that." "Nor did I," added Mrs. Washington, Samuel's mother. "My boy's reading better than he ever has." "Maybe Miss Zimmerman is a bit peculiar, but she's a good teacher." The meeting dissolved into chaos, with arguments breaking out across the church. Through it all, Flynn kept hold of Olivia's hands, his eyes asking a question she hadn't yet answered. "Did you mean it?" she asked, her voice so low only he could hear it. "About me belonging with you, every word," he replied. "But I understand if it's not what you want. You came here to be a teacher, not a rancher's wife." Olivia looked around the church at the divided town, some defending her, others condemning her, all of them still seeing her as something apart, something different. Then she looked back at Flynn, who saw her not as a curiosity or an outsider, but simply as Olivia. "Ask me properly," she said. Flynn's eyes widened, then crinkled at the corners with joy. Right there in the middle of the uproar, he knelt before her. "Olivia Zimmerman, will you marry me?" "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Yes, I will." Their private moment was interrupted by Mayor Thompson, who had finally restored some semblance of order. "This meeting will come to order," he shouted. We will now vote on whether to retain Miss Zimmerman as our schoolteacher. To everyone's surprise, including Olivia's, the vote was narrowly in her favor. It seemed that Flynn's impassioned defense, combined with the testimonials of her students, had swayed enough minds to grant her a reprieve. "Well," Mayor Thompson said, clearly displeased with the outcome, "it appears Miss Zimmerman will remain our teacher until the end of the term. However," he added, glaring at Flynn, "I expect proper decorum to be maintained at all times. No more rides home, no more inappropriate displays." Flynn stood tall beside Olivia. "With all due respect, Mayor, Miss Zimmerman has agreed to be my wife. We'll conduct ourselves with dignity, but I won't pretend she's not the woman I love." The mayor's face turned an alarming shade of purple, but before he could respond, Reverend Caldwell stepped forward. "Perhaps this is God's plan," he suggested mildly. "The good book tells us not to judge by outward appearances. Maybe we should take that lesson to heart." In the weeks that followed, Redemption Springs slowly adjusted to the idea of their unusual schoolteacher marrying the half-Shoshone rancher. There were still whispers, still sidelong glances, but something had shifted. When Olivia walked down the street, more people nodded in greeting than turned away. Flynn rode into town every afternoon to escort Olivia back to the boarding house, and on weekends, he took her out to his ranch to show her what would soon be their home. It was modest but well-built, with large windows that looked out over rolling grasslands to distant mountains. "My father built this house for my mother," Flynn told her as they stood on the porch one golden afternoon. "He made the windows extra large because she said she never wanted to feel trapped inside. She wanted to always be able to see the land, the sky, the changing seasons." Olivia leaned against him, feeling the solid warmth of his body against hers. "It's beautiful. I can see why she loved it." "You'll add your own touches," Flynn said, his arm around her waist. "Make it ours instead of just mine." "Ours," Olivia repeated, savoring the word. "I've never had an ours before." Flynn turned her to face him, his expression serious. "You do now, and you always will as long as I'm alive." Their wedding took place in June, after the school term ended. To Olivia's surprise, most of the town attended, including Mayor Thompson, who grudgingly admitted that she had proven herself a capable teacher despite her peculiarities. Mrs. Holloway sniffed disapprovingly when Olivia moved out of the boarding house, but she also pressed a hand-embroidered handkerchief into the bride's hands. "Every woman needs something pretty," she said gruffly. Reverend Caldwell performed the ceremony in the church, with wildflowers decorating the simple altar and sunlight streaming through the windows. When Flynn lifted Olivia's veil and looked into her mismatched eyes with nothing but love, she felt the last pieces of her heart, the parts she had guarded so carefully, finally healing. "I, Flynn Xavier, take you, Olivia Zimmerman, to be my lawfully wedded wife," he said, his voice steady and sure. "I promise to cherish your uniqueness, to defend your spirit, and to remind you every day that you belong right here beside me." Olivia's voice trembled as she spoke her own vows, but her heart was certain. After a lifetime of being told she didn't belong, she had finally found her home, not in a place, but in a person who saw her completely and loved her anyway. That evening, as they rode together toward their ranch now, Flynn reined his horse to a stop at the top of a rise overlooking the property. The setting sun bathed the landscape in amber light, making everything glow with promise. "Welcome home, Mrs. Xavier," he said, his voice soft with wonder. Olivia looked out over the land that was now hers to love, then up at the man who had given her not just a place to belong but a person to belong to. "It's more than I ever dreamed possible," she said truthfully. "We're just getting started," Flynn promised, leaning over to kiss her gently. "This is only the beginning of our story." As they rode down the hill toward their future, Olivia thought about all the people who had told her she would never belong anywhere. How wrong they had been. Here, with Flynn beside her and a home waiting for them, she belonged completely. Her mismatched eyes saw the beauty of their land with perfect clarity, and her once guarded heart was finally, fully home. Over the following years, Olivia and Flynn built a life that defied all expectations. She continued teaching at the Redemption Springs School, riding in with Flynn each morning and back home each evening. Their ranch prospered under their joint care, with Flynn's knowledge of cattle and horses complemented by Olivia's Eastern education and meticulous record-keeping. When their first child was born, a daughter with her father's hazel eyes and her mother's determination, the town that had once rejected Olivia celebrated with them. And when that daughter grew old enough for school, she proudly told her classmates, "My mama has the most special eyes in the world. One to see the past, one to see the future, and both to see love everywhere she looks." Olivia Xavier, once told she would never belong anywhere, had found her place in a frontier town, in a ranch house with large windows, and most of all in the heart of a man who had the courage to say, "She belongs right here beside me."